Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you are all well on this thirsty Thursday. It's making me actually thirsty. I don't know what I'll drink. Probably not. What was it that we had at Christmas? Can you remember? That manky drink that tasted... I don't even know. I'll have to find something different this Christmas because that ain't far away. Anyway, you're looking absolutely amazing. I'm getting straight into the meat and potatoes as this is a very telling article. It's going to show you something interesting about Ann Taylor, which I think warrants questioning. Some emails that are apparently sent. But let's just get to the point, the main point of this at the moment. So we know that shortly after Bryan Kohberger's incarceration, after the plea deal, there was a video that was leaked showing him apparently in his cell. There was a lot of question over its authenticity, but it does appear that this video, albeit there's obviously there were some enhanced versions later on and things like that, but the actual original video, it was a video that was taken. But check this out, right? So Idaho without answers in investigation of authentic leaked Kohberger prison video. This is Idaho Statesman. This is a report by Kevin Fixler. The source of a security footage leak of Bryan Kohberger in an Idaho prison cell remains undiscovered a month after videos of the man convicted of killing 4 University of Idaho students published online in direct violation of the Idaho Department of Correction policy. Prison leaders pledged in August to root out the individual or individuals responsible through an investigation of its corrections staff at Idaho's maximum security prison known as IMSI. The leak represents a clear violation of IDOC standard procedures, officials said, and the leaker could be fired or charged with a crime. Videotaping and publicly sharing security footage is prohibited conduct, and we will be reviewing all legal options, including criminal prosecution, which we're going to touch on this as we move through, because I'm calling this out right now. The prison system said in a statement last month, the safety and security of our staff and incarcerated population remain our top priority. At the time, the agency warned of the possibility the footage was faked or generated with artificial intelligence, but an internal email from IDOC Director Bree Derrick to prison staff the same day last month, obtained by the Idaho Statesman through a public records request, stated a strong belief the footage was real. So first of all, let's touch on this, that they seem to know when this video came about. They obviously know when it was distributed. So you can, there's no escaping that you can pretty much be able to look at the day. They've obviously got CCTV within the hospital, Freudian slip, prison, and they would be able to go back through that footage and find that exact clip and therefore pretty much nail that down to a specific time. Specific time. Do you agree? Do you agree or do you disagree? Let me know down below. They would be able to go back over their own footage and locate that exact piece of footage to match up with the leaked footage to pretty much give you an exact time of when the person was filming, was recording, because that was obviously recorded off a screen. That was someone using a phone and recording it directly off of the screen. So first of all, you've got to think to yourself, right, so this is someone who's got access to the screens that show the CCTV, which there's going to be, I would imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, but some room with the monitors that monitor the CCTV. So the person who did this has got access to that room. And I would imagine that there's CCTV that covers that room. So you would be able to find the day, pretty much find the time, be able to find footage of who was in that area at that time, and pretty much be able to locate who the individual was who did this. Or if there was several individuals, I wouldn't have thought that 150 people turned up all at once, so there's going to be a massive amount of people. Even if you said 2 or 3, then you get their phones. You have got probable cause to search their phones to find out exactly who did this. So I ain't buying for one fucking second that after a month that they don't know who did this. I ain't buying it. I am not buying it. Tell me I'm whatever. Tell me that I'm wrong. Let me know down below what you think. Because you cannot be a rational individual if you do not believe that this prison can find out in a month of investigating who was the culprit in releasing this video. And if they can't, if they genuinely can't, then you really have to again question just how good Idaho is when it comes to investigating crimes, because this was a crime. This was a crime. At the very least, this individual should have lost their job, should have been sacked. Fucking gross misconduct. Gross misconduct. Every day of the week and twice on a Sunday. When you know, you know. And also, if that weren't enough, there could have been, and there very likely should have been, criminal charges brought forward because it was a crime. But lo and behold, they claim that they don't even know who did it. Don't even know who did it. How is that possible? How is that even possible? But again, let me know down below. But this is when this is going to start to get quite interesting. It says these appear to be taken from inside IMSI. Well, obviously, they were taken from inside IMSI. We are taking this matter very seriously, she wrote. Are you really? I don't think so. IDOC officials confirmed to the Statesman on Wednesday that they determined the video of Kohberger was genuine, but still do not have a suspect. Bollocks. While many edited or AI-enhanced versions of the video exist, we have determined that the original video appears to be authentic. Well, how do you know it was authentic? How do you know the original video was authentic? I'll tell you the only way that you can determine whether this video is authentic or not. And that is that you can go back over the footage and find the same footage on your system, which will be time-stamped and date-stamped. So therefore, you can cross-reference that with the staff that was in the area. And as aforementioned, very likely be able to look at your own CCTV of who was in that area at that time. Am I wrong? It says, authentic and in clear violation of IDOC policy. IDOC spokesperson Sandra Kazita, fucking summoned magic, said in a statement, the investigation in this matter is ongoing and remains a priority. It's not going to take you a month to do what work needed to be done to locate this individual. I ain't buying it. Idaho State Police typically oversees investigations. ISP. So we're back to the same old fucking story. This is now Idaho State Police, typically oversees investigations at state prisons, but IDOC is handling the review of the security video leaked internally. Of course you are. So you're not even outsourcing it then, which again is just that's indicative of a cover-up. This should be outsourced to ISP. Not that you'll probably get a different outcome. So it says it is under active investigation. IDOC spokesperson Blake Lopez told the Statesman by email earlier this month. About 3 weeks into the inquiry, we do not have any updates to share. So it goes on to say, right, Kohberger 30 pleaded guilty in July to 4 counts of first-degree murder in an agreement with prosecutors to avoid the death penalty. Never a truer statement said. I like this because it don't say Kohberger 30 pleaded guilty in July to 4 counts of first-degree murder in an agreement with prosecutors because he did the crime. It basically says to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to consecutive life terms with no chance of parole or the ability to appeal, which isn't entirely true. We still do have options, post-conviction relief, habeas corpus, so this may not be the end of Bryan Kohberger just yet. Who knows? But this is what I find interesting. When we come down here, just hours after his sentencing hearing, Kohberger was transferred from the Ada County Jail in Boise to the maximum security prison near Kuna on July 23rd. According to prison system housing records, 6 days later, he was moved from the medical unit where he was initially held in solitary confinement cell in the prison's J block, the records showed. On August 14th, Kohberger's attorney and Taylor emailed state prison leadership about 2 short video clips posted to Reddit of what seemed to be her client in prison. Taylor's email was included in correspondence between IDOC staff and officials in the governor's office that the statesman obtained for a public records request. The videos are purported to have come from a guard taking video of security cameras covering Bryan's cell. Taylor wrote, "I am bringing this to your attention because this causes me concern for Mr. Kohberger's safety." Kohberger's public defense team declined interview requests from the statesman since a long-standing gag order was lifted in the high-profile murder case in mid-July, citing ethical and legal obligations to their client. So they're not talking out. Now, what I will say is it's not uncommon for both sides of this argument, I suppose, for people to stay silent, but it isn't unusual for legal teams like defense attorneys to come out and speak with the media. This, to me, would indicate a couple of different things. It just goes on to say, obviously, you can see on there, complain about mistreatment, yada, yada, yada. But let me just come up here, right? So they talk about the fact they're not speaking to media because of ethical and legal obligations to their client. Well, at the point where Bryan Kohberger has pled guilty, he's been sentenced and he's been incarcerated, there isn't really any legal obligations at that point. They would cease. There isn't anything left. She's done a job. She was acting as a public defense attorney, offering the services to someone who was accused of a crime. All she had to do was to offer the best service that she could for this individual. But she seems to be citing ongoing ethical and legal obligations to their client, which I find interesting. And I also find this interesting from a moral perspective, right? Now, apparently, this all came from this was a curveball. Kohberger had basically said, didn't do it all the way through. Jeff Nye even turned around and said, this came out of nowhere. Literally came out of nowhere. Kohberger had been saying, and the legal team had been saying, he didn't do it all the way through. And Taylor, standing in the courtroom, would be saying Bryan Kohberger is innocent of this crime. She would be touching the guy, putting a hand on him, on his shoulder. Same with Eliza Masseth. But it does get to the point, right, when if Bryan Kohberger was genuinely guilty of this crime, and I'm not saying he's not, but what I'm trying to point out is about the moral compass. And yes, you've got a job to do, right? And that's it. And it's a fucking job that does come with a lot of backlash. At the end of the day, it is their job. People who are accused of a crime, they have and should get representation. That's a legal standpoint that they get legal representation. So they are bound by law to offer this guy this. But just say, right, you believe that he said, I didn't do it. At what point then did Bryan Kohberger turn around? Because he must have turned around and said, look, I want to take a plea deal. And then you spur off, don't you? Because you've then got two situations here. And Taylor's question, because if it wasn't something that Ann Taylor raised herself and said, look, Bryan, this is where we're going. We're going to trial in a few weeks' time. The public, they ain't on your side. The judge ain't on your side. Things ain't looking good. I'm not fully prepared for this. I've openly stated this in court. I'm not fully prepared. And I think we're going into this, or could be going into this, blind to a certain degree. So I have to raise concerns that there is a risk that you could go to trial, get found guilty of this get found guilty of this crime, and you could be sentenced to death because of the nature of the crime. And the public are they're going to be angry. So I am warning you that this is the likelihood. When you're talking between clients and attorneys, there comes a point where you talk about worst case scenario. We get into where we can see the trial looming, and that conversation has to be had, and it will be had. What is worst case scenario? The flip side of the coin is Ann Taylor should, because of the position that she held, been able to say, look, but we have in court said that I aren't prepared. I've got that on record. I've got it in court. So the appeal later on down the line, we could appeal that we just weren't ready. We weren't ready. And she would have had good grounds for that. But ultimately, Bryan Kohberger has got to accept that, and he's got to accept that this appeal process then comes off the back end of being found guilty. But then the flip side of that is, so okay, we go down the route of he didn't want to roll the dice. He's innocent. He doesn't want to roll the dice. He's scared of the death penalty, so he bows out gracefully. That's the way it is. The other spur is he does it. He's done it. He's guilty of the crime. So that then becomes a conversation. Does he go to Ann Taylor? Look, I did it. I did it. So why would then Ann Taylor, if she's been supportive of this guy who has basically said, didn't do it for 2.5 fucking years, all of a sudden, on the final stretch, he turns around and says, I want to take a plea deal. I don't want to go to trial. Why is that, Brian? Because I did it. I am guilty of this crime. Where does your moral compass sit then? Because yes, it's your job, and you are bound by law to offer your services. But once all is said and done, and the curtain closes, everyone fucks off home, except Brian, while he goes to his new home. Where is your moral compass sit? Because ultimately, yes, you've done your job, so you can be proud of that. Look, I did what I could. I did what I'm bound in law to do. But surely you're not still thinking, if you're in the knowledge that this individual went into this home and executed these 4 individuals in the manner with which we've been told happened. And again, I'm not saying Brian did it. I'm not saying Brian didn't. I'm just talking about a complex situation where legal representation is told by their client that they did it. Surely at that point, your legal obligation, once that ceases, why would you be emailing this prison, for instance, to say, I'm concerned for Bryan Kohberger's safety? If you know he did it, if you know he's guilty of this crime, and that in your town, bearing in mind Ann Taylor is Idahoan, she's an Idahoan, sorority girl, University of Idaho, all that jazz. She's, these are her people. She cares enough to email and say, look, I'm bringing this to your attention. This has come out, because she's got no fucking legal obligation to him at that point. Doesn't matter. This is now purely about keeping an eye on what's going on in the aftermath and raising a concern saying, I'm worried about Bryan Kohberger's safety. If I was in Ann Taylor's position, and this is me being straight up, once my legal part is done and he has told me, yeah, I did it. I did it. I went in there, killed them all. And that's it. Yes, I wouldn't be perhaps going into the public arena and doing interviews, because I would be thinking, I'm a defense attorney. At the end of the day, I want people to see that I just keep my mouth shut. Whatever happens, I'm just someone who's going to keep my mouth shut, even if they're found guilty, whatever. You got no worry with me. My lips are sealed. I know that loose lips sink ships and all that jazz. I'm not one to speak. That may do her some credibility favours in the future, but I ain't going to be messaging this prison and saying I'm concerned for Bryan Kohberger's safety. In the back of my mind, I'll be thinking, now you're in there, you're likely going to get what you fucking deserve, and I don't give a shit because I've done my job. Now the rest is fucking your problem, son. So it does raise that question. Does Ann Taylor know Bryan Kohberger is guilty? Or does she still believe that Bryan Kohberger is innocent? Let me know down below what you think. Because this, to me, and again, shoot me down in flames if you want, one of two things. And that is that Ann Taylor's moral compass is severely off kilter. And I'm one who rarely truly believes in moral compass. I've literally got it on here. Moral compass. Do you know what I mean? Moral compass. So it's something that I fully agree in and invest in. So either her moral compass is fucking way off track, because we're talking about she's emailing behind the scenes to check in on a mass fucking killer who has killed her own fucking people, or she is still believing that Bryan Kohberger is innocent of this crime. And she feels that she's still got, this mother head on. I've got to protect this individual because he shouldn't fucking be where he is, and this is fucking sad. You know what I mean? It is what it is. Even if Bryan Kohberger is guilty of this crime, but he still went the distance telling her he was innocent. You still got to think about that. You still got to then play out how that conversation went and why it went the way it did. At the end of the day, we're in this position now where we don't know. So I know some people are convinced, right? And there is a difference between being convinced of something and what you're convinced of being accurate and correct. I fully appreciate and understand, and you're welcome to be here. I'm not going to vilify or shoot people down who believe that Bryan Kohberger is guilty of this crime, because I understand why you think that. The downside is certain people can't understand why people in my position struggle with it. And we struggle with it very similar to what's now evolving in the Charlie Kirk situation. And that is that you get told a story, but you don't have enough supportive evidence to satisfy what I want. Yeah, we all have different and varying ways that we're convinced and levels of convincing. And some of us are very easy to convince. We only have to see certain things and that the box is checked and the rest is fucking history. For me, there's a lot more boxes. There's a lot more boxes, and I want to walk away from it thinking that all of those boxes have been ticked. A confession to me doesn't mean anything, especially when things like this happen. And there are other things we have spoken about the documents. Now, the documents don't really offer anything. We're just getting repetitive things being cited that we already know, that they're all questionable. We haven't seen the sheaf. We haven't seen the Amazon stuff. All of these really, really important things we just haven't seen. We've just been told that they're there, and just to trust us. It's there. You just need to fill in the blanks yourself. It's like the end of Inception and watching that totem spin. Does it fall? Does it not? You make up your own. Is he awake? Is he in a dream? Who knows? You make it up yourself. You're given a snapshot into something, and you have to fill in the gaps. And that's what the Idaho 4 case has done. The totem is still spinning, and we don't know if it's dropped or not. For me, anyway, and for a few people. But again, if you believe he's guilty, I don't feel bad that you think that. I don't feel bad towards you. I don't feel anything. It's just you've been convinced. I haven't. And there you go. But let me know down below what you think to this. Is her moral compass way off? Or does she genuinely still think he's innocent of this crime? Love you all. Mwah.